Hi, everybody, and welcome back to episode 5 of Reclaim Your Field, a guide to identifying and pulling back your energy from the patriarchal structures. I'm Kristina Meiers. I'm an energetics practitioner and teacher and mystic translator, here to help you navigate through these massive shifts and changes that we are collectively going through right now. Today, we're going to talk about one thing that I think doesn't get discussed enough, and that is around how the patriarchy has operated inside spiritual communities. I think in some ways this is the most insidious because it has access to the deepest parts of a person. It preys upon their seeking, it preys upon their longing, and their relationship with the sacred. And in many ways, it tries to put itself between you as an individual and your relationship with not only your higher self and trusting yourself and your intuition, but also whatever you believe in as source, whatever you want to call it. So this isn't an argument at all against spiritual practices. This is about how do we reframe the conversation, and how do we really understand how to develop discernment to know when a community is really about building your trust and having you come back to your own knowing, and when it's building something around your dependency on someone else's authority. So this is a really important distinction. And for much of the last, thousands of years, but especially in the last, 20, 30 years, we've seen an increase around New Age spiritualism as well. And so we've seen a lot of this amplify in our collective consciousness in a totally different way than it has before. I want to make a note, though, that these patterns appear across every tradition, not just in the New Age tradition. It is embedded very much in every religious, Eastern and Western, every indigenous appropriating. All of this is not immune to the patriarchy in any way, shape, or form. So if we talk about really the key attributes where we can start to see inverted agendas in these spiritual communities, these are the top 6 ways in which we really start to see this amplify. The first one is around hierarchical leadership. Usually there is a person or a leader who is positioned to have the word, right? And they have the knowledge, they have the education, or they position them to be the person who is most closely aligned with something that you do not have. And they don't want to be questioned about it. They don't want you to question it. They don't want to be questioned about it. And so this is very much a red flag in any form, where there's somebody who says, oh, I know everything and you don't know anything. And this is exactly the way that it's going to be. Don't ask any questions. Unfortunately, this is permeated in many, many different type of systems that we see, these organized systems that we see, or this is one of the biggest red flags that we can identify in recognizing that patriarchal inversion. The second one that has come to really big prominence probably in the last 50 years is around guru dynamics. This is where the New Age spiritual communities have accelerated in many ways. And that's when there is a teacher who is positioned as uniquely enlightened or specially chosen. And so again, it creates this type of, it's almost a signal within your system. And especially if you're in a place where you are looking outside of yourself for guidance, that these folks can really kind of cling into that. They can get into your energy field in that way. And it starts to make you question yourself. Okay. So watch this carefully. It's a very common mechanism. And it's not saying that every guru is wrong. There's a lot of people who have pure intentions that do have a lot of experience. They have a lot of insights, a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom. And sometimes we as the students will put these people up on a pedestal because, again, we're looking outside of ourselves for guidance versus turning inward. And a lot of our society is structured around doubting ourselves constantly. And so this can get amplified and ego can take over in some cases, and people then starting to really look at that person as some god or goddess or whatever else too. So we have to look at both sides of the equation. But anybody who is holding power over and then using it as a way to abuse people, manipulate, control, extort financially is where we start to get into some very gross territory, frankly. The next one is around controlling the doctrine and really saying, well, this is the only way you can do it. You have to follow this path and you have to go down this route and da 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 da. When you start to have a spiritual awakening, you become very excited. You want to share that excitement with everybody. And that can become a conflict of sorts because your excitement can then also turn into trying to make everybody around you wanting them to follow the same path you followed. If you just do this and this and this and this, just like I did, everything will be great. So this is a thing that we all have to kind of be conscious of in ourselves as well. But if somebody's saying you can't explore other perspectives, if there is shaming going on or even consequences in some cases for the doubts, that is a big red flag. So any community that cannot survive on being questioned is very, very dangerous. And so you want somebody and a community that allows you to explore and continually says, go back and trust yourself, come back to yourself, embody yourself. And that's where you're going to find the answers. The fourth concept is around the financial extraction. Sometimes you start to see these pyramid schemes emerge where they get you in here and you're really excited and you had a really great thing. And then it's like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Again, sometimes this is not perpetuated out of trying to mislead people, but anybody who positions themselves as an authority where then you are feeling obligated to provide large sums of money around supporting their lifestyle is a big one. And so you need to kind of understand how the community works and if there's any sort of pressures that you are feeling out of guilt or anything else to try and financially support somebody in a position of power. The next one is around isolation patterns. This one's really dangerous. It's where if you start to get into a community and they start to really discourage you from interacting with people outside of that community. If people have left the community and they are spoken very poorly of, or they are harassed by members of the community, this is a big, clear indicator that this is not a very good community to be a part of. And then finally, there's authority by gender. This is very prominent across multiple spiritual communities, especially when you look at the traditional religious organizations where only men are allowed to hold certain positions within the organization, that women's roles are defined, they're limited, they're subordinated by doctrine. All of those things can be very much indicators that there is an inversion agenda within that establishment, and that can be not the best for your own personal growth. All of these things are around your personal sovereignty and about looking at how do you pull your power back to yourself and look to what works for you individually. What works for one person is not going to work for another person. And we all have to be uniquely tuned in to our own authority to be able to make those decisions for ourselves. And part of this journey that many of us take is we have to sample a lot of different things to be able to find out what really works for us. So you're going to see a wide swath, especially in the, in the new age spiritual community. I've kind of seen everything. I've experienced everything. I've been indoctrinated into some of this thinking for a while. And at the end of the day, it's always about coming back to yourself and what's going to work for you. So when you find a community that is really practicing around sovereignty and looking back to yourself, these are the best communities to be able to be a part of. It's a teacher or community that genuinely is serving you consistently to come back to yourself, to your own knowing, not towards them, okay? They may have experiences that they can share with you, but it doesn't mean that theirs is right for you. So you've got to use the discernment to figure out what's best for you. All questions, all doubts are welcome. They're not managed. And you should be leaving these gatherings feeling way more capable and more like yourself, not dependent upon something. And anybody who's come in contact, there's not contempt, there's not finger pointing, there's not attacking going on. So these are really important components of finding a community that really is helping you to find more about the power in yourself. Now, I will say a big caveat is each of us have to take our own responsibility in this process. And if you are still operating out of a place of lack, if you're operating out of a place for looking outside of yourself for all of the answers, sometimes you can get really caught up in some of these communities, even if they're well-meaning communities, as again, putting somebody up on a pedestal because they're able to channel information or they're able to provide information that makes sense to you. So be very careful about how you're positioning people in your own mind, because that can be a lot of how the distortion comes in. I think the most important thing is really to find a practice that works for you. And that's really the most important act available right now for you. Just something that feels good to you, whether it's a cup of coffee on your couch for 5 minutes, if it's taking a walk out in nature, if it's exercising, whatever it is, that practice is about what works for you and what lives inside of you. And no two practices are alike. I've got friends that I'm very close to that are very spiritually focused. Each of us do things totally different. We do a lot of things alike, but I think each of us even tunes in differently. The way that we receive information, the way that we tune in. I have my own process that I've just developed in the last couple of years that is very different from how one of my close friends does it. But we co-collaborate a lot and we work together a lot. And it's a beautiful relationship that we have, but I've had to really peel back the layers over many, many years to get to a place where I'm doing something that's truly mine. And that just takes trial and error. Again, this is a journey. We're all on this journey. There's a lot of well-intentioned people out there. There's a lot of not so well-intentioned people, or they are just in the state of thinking that they're doing good when they're continuing to perpetuate a system that is about control and it's about power over people. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about our physical bodies and dive into the standards that we are living by, and really whose standards are we living by. If you haven't gotten the free guide, please go to my website at stinameiers.com. The guide is there. If you go under Start Here on the navigation, that is where the guide is living, or under free resources. Take care, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks.